Alright. I'm sorry. I know I've been promising this for years, but it's finally here, okay? Just please put the Bible down. I really don't want to read the story of Saul and the 100 foreskins again. So yes, here we are. Just a few days away from the biggest funny of them all. And I'm excited as hell, man. So with Godzilla 2014 and Kong Skull Island having already gotten the Barack Obama sign of approval, it's finally time I talk about King of the Monsters. Right next to atomic bomb talk. This is easily the second most discussed thing in the comments section of my history and evolution of Godzilla video. A video I'm sure a lot of you came from well over 3 years ago. So hey, thanks a ton for sticking around and listening to my loaf of bread sounding ass. In some ways, I'm actually pretty glad that I put it off, since it really allowed me to think about the movie more and come to a definite conclusion in my head. Anyway, let's go ahead and actually get to talking about the movie before I end up delaying it again for another 2 years. Godzilla King of the Monsters, directed by Michael... How do you pronounce that last name?
Doherty.
Doherty?
Doherty.
Oh, thank you. Directed by Michael Dougherty, was released back in May of 2019 and is a direct sequel to Godzilla 2014, as well as a loose sequel to Kong Skull Island. This movie was easily one of my most anticipated movies of the year, and one I had been looking forward to seeing since it was announced not long after the release of the original movie. And let me tell you, the build up to it online was pretty piss-worthy. That sounds bad, but I mean that as a good thing. We had the announcement of 3 fan-favorite monsters being featured, the release of Kong Skull Island, plus the shared universe with Godzilla, also Marvel apparently, as well as this really cool thing Legendary was doing where they would leak classified Monarch documents online, and each would very slowly show off the new monsters and their designs. It was all pretty dabberific, and a great build-up to the eventual release of the movie. But sadly, not everything was hype lit. All things considered, the pre-production was pretty stinky. Next to nobody from Godzilla 2014 came back, that being cast and crew. One big name in particular that didn't come back was director Gareth Edwards. Many people believe that he, in large part, had a lot to do with the success of the last movie, and his name alone would at least reel some people in, right? But when it came time to direct again, he was just kinda like, ew. And then he directed the Star Wars movie that I couldn't remember the name of for a hot minute. Even Aaron Taylor Johnson decided to be like, nah, and just stay in Piss City or whatever the hell he does. So Legendary, who kinda already pushed their movie a year back for Edwards being like, it's okay, we'll wait, now pretty much had to start from scratch. They ended up recruiting... I'm not gonna say his name again, I'm just gonna call him Doughboy. Doughboy, an up-and-coming horror director at the time with well-liked releases such as Trick or Treat and Krampus. They're both pretty good, by the way, check them out. Strange choice, but hey, we've seen Stranger Things. No, that's not what I meant, but we might as well talk about that too. With pretty much nobody returning from the 2014 movie, aside from Ken Watanabe and Sally Hawkins post getting sodomized by a fish, we had a whole new crew of actors join the fray, and they were honestly some pretty solid choices. Kyle Chandler, Vera Farmiga, Millie Bobby Brown, I don't know why I keep thinking Charles Dance is Patrick Stewart. Like, I should be thinking, oh, that's Tywin Lannister. But instead I'm like, the f*** is Captain Picard doing here? Honestly, I'm just glad they didn't decide to cast a cardboard box as the lead again. Cast aside, there were some other things here and there that made a good few people. There were some other things here, and they... This is really offensive. Cast aside, there were a few other things here and there that made a good... I did it again. Cast aside, there were some other things here and there that made a good few other people raise some eyebrows and question if this movie was really going to be alright. But more on the results of that later on. This movie follows the Russell family, who were directly impacted by the 2014 Godzilla events through the loss of their son, Andrew. 5 years later, and the family now has a technology they plan to use to control the monsters called the Orca. The machine is then used on a newly hatched Mothra when these guys break in and take the Orca along with these two. Then the mom turns out to be kind of a dickhead and releases Ghidorah, who then releases Rodan, who then fights with him and Godzilla. This leads to the oxygen destroyer killing Godzilla and Ghidorah literally releasing every other monster in the world. Boom, big Mothra. Ken Watanabe doesn't think the paycheck is worth it anymore, so he nukes Godzilla and now he ain't dead no more. Godzilla fights Ghidorah and it's actually pretty epic, and it ends when and Godzilla is now the king of the monsters. Pretty freaking sweet.
Stinky.
Normally, I try not to be a goober and do these plot summaries because, come on, all of you have seen the movie already. But I found that, even though this was my 4th time watching, I could not for the life of me remember half of the plot points because all I cared about was Godzilla tackling Ghidorah through a literal skyscraper. And because some of this is important to my thoughts on the movie, I figured, why not? Anyway, the movie was released to a pretty mixed reception that often leaned more towards negative. Not only that, but it opened to a pretty lackluster opening weekend, and only made a grand total of $386.6 million. Which is pretty dookie compared to Godzilla 2014 and Kong Skull Island, which made
almost
$200 million more each. It was honestly pretty sad to see. I expected that with the inclusion of these big names, both actors and monsters, this would have made a pretty good amount more. It seemed like general audiences either didn't know or didn't care about it though. Fans, on the other hand, seem to absolutely adore this movie. Rave reviews left and right about how much they loved seeing these beloved monsters on the big screen in a new, modernized way that still felt faithful to the original Japanese movies. To all these people, I say, that's great. I'm so glad that you got all the enjoyment that you did, and I'm sure that you were the kind of person they had in mind while making it. Me, on the other hand, I feel that Godzilla King of the Monsters is just kinda meh. God, with my opinions on a lot of these movies, you'd think I wrote the WikiHow on how to make your entire audience want to slam the Code of Hammurabi over your f***ing head, but let me explain. Let's start with something that I think a lot of us can agree on. This whole family drama thing that they tried to plug in like in the 2014 Godzilla, it still really doesn't work. This storyline they weave to try to hold this thing together, and the characters behind it, are not only pretty stinky, but even kind of stanky. Although, there's only so much I can fault this movie for that, since they really couldn't get a hold of the original cast and they had to start from scratch. But it does lead to this awkward disjointedness that really just can't be overlooked. During an interview, director Michael Doughboy says that he wanted his movie to be his Aliens compared to Gareth's Alien. Pretty much meaning that while the 2014 movie was supposed to be this more composed action thriller type beat, King of the Monsters promised to release the Chumbawamba. Also, just generally go in a different direction, and I feel very comfortable saying that was accomplished. However, I feel it works a lot more in the Alien movies because you've got this connecting factor in Ripley, somebody that you can attach to. But in these movies, there's just absolutely nobody. Much like every other character in the Monsterverse, they don't exist. It feels like they're only there to move the plot along and, in Millie Bobby Brown's case, help the audience understand what's going on. Like, I swear to God, she actually just dumbed everything down to the most simple, minute sentence to make sure that the audience understood because they know that they'd pay attention to her. Ooh, Stranger Things, girl! Ooh! Either way, that actually might be kind of necessary because this movie moves at one hell of a breakneck pace. At least in the beginning, for sure. Like, I swear to God, we moved like 12 different locations in the matter of 2 minutes. It's infuriating. It's something I'm not a big fan of because before you're even able to digest what happened in the scene you just watched, you've already moved on to another one where you're getting a ton more exposition thrown at you. Which sucks because because there are some things in there that could be a really good means to develop the story or the characters to a point where I can actually care about them and empathize. I can remember a specific line where the dad character talks about missing his daughter after being gone for a while and also becoming an alcoholic, which is a thing, I guess. Generic for sure, right? But at least it's something to grasp onto. Although, to some, I'm sure this could be considered a plus, because everything going on with this really doesn't matter, and rushing it along does mean that you get to see Mothra stabbing Rodan sooner. But to me, that still just doesn't excuse Legendary's frankly lazy implementation of this family drama in a big monster movie, especially because it takes up so much of the screen time. And I get it, you can't just make the entire movie a big monster fight because that costs like $1 billion trillion. I know, I get it, I know, I do. But at the same time, if I was looking for that, I'd go watch, I don't know, Colossal, or The Babadook, or Killer Clowns from Kansas on Crack. Honestly, this probably wouldn't have been such a big deal to me if we hadn't seen this issue before. It also just makes it that much more frustrating. We can see how good things would have been if they just played their cards a little better. Specifically, I keep going back to the Ken Watanabe sacrifice scene in my mind. I could so clearly see the perfect version of that scene. It was right there. You had it in the palm of your hands, but you spilt your damn beans, Winslow. All this tension and all this buildup for a character we knew next to nothing about, but yet it was still the most emotional scene in the movie. Again, this is absolutely a me thing, okay? But I just thought how great this scene would have been if it was the dad that made the sacrifice instead. Knowing full well what happened in the events of 2014, he's now going to save the very thing he hates to save everyone else. That's big. That's emotional. That's
lots and lots of praise!
Better yet, in my crazed fantasy world, if we could have saved Bryan Cranston for this moment where he comes face to face with his inner demons that he's been facing for several decades, knowing that he has to put it all behind him despite constantly failing to. Just imagine how big the emotion would be. Speaking of tasing the testicles, let's talk about the Oxygen Destroyer. Man, I think there's more respect for Guts' boy hole than they showed for this thing. Yes, it is a pivotal moment in the movie. They sure don't build it up like one. As a matter of fact, they don't build it up at all. It just exists, and then they drop the damn thing without much of a care. In the plot, it's just a really, really strong bomb. Like, I get it. It's really strong. Strong enough to hit with the impact of
lots and lots of praise.
But to the Goji fans that this Easter egg is meant for, we know that this means a lot more. This thing right here is human cruelty at its worst. A destructive device that leaves absolutely nothing behind in its wake. It's like a Jimmy Neutron brain blast if it committed mass genocide. Tag this along with the fact that this movie is meant to have a climate change message, and all I see is a massive missed opportunity. This could have been the centerpiece that they were looking for. The thing that tied everything together. Not only that, but I think it would have been a lot more effective than the Orca too. Especially because the Orca just makes me feel constipated. I don't know. Just out of all the things, the care behind the
Oxygen Destroyer
kind of felt like the biggest slap in the face because everything else, specifically the monsters, were handled with such great care. It's just small stuff like this that really hampers down the experience for me and makes it just that much more difficult to come back to. But before you all decide to crucify me, let's go ahead and talk about the good, of which there is plenty. Since I already touched upon it, let's go ahead and talk about
the monsters.
And let me tell you, you know what I like the most? Faithfully recreated monster adaptations of classic Showa era monsters. I mean, wow. Just wow. There was so much room for error to be made, but they really tickled my
No.
with every single element on these monsters. No surprise that the CG looks amazing. it's one thing I haven't really talked about in these videos, but Legendary might just have the best looking CG around. It looks so good. But aside from that, the designs themselves are beautiful. Not only did they manage to stay true to the original designs, but they gave them this ancient, godly feel that makes every scene with them feel like a big moment. They absolutely command your attention and steal the show every time they're on screen. Not like there's much to steal from in the first place, but I don't know, it's just even the sounds they make all sound like modernized versions of their Showa cries, and it's just wonderful. One thing I loved about them too is how they each have their own unique color palettes that really help them stand out that much more, and helps give some
セクシー
to whatever scene they're in. Those bright flaming reds on Rodan, that beautiful lustrous blue with Mothra, and that striking piss yellow on Ghidorah are all really something else.
ケビン素晴らしい
Might I just add, and this won't take away from my opinion of the movie, but it's a shame that they couldn't get more Toho monsters in here. Apparently, Gigan was supposed to be in here, and my god, I would kill to see how the hell Legendary would tackle putting in that freak into this movie. Oh well. I guess we'll have to settle for Behemoth instead. I mean, he's cool, I guess. I'm also really glad that they decided not to mess with their origins or anything like that too much. Would have been real easy to pull a 98 and make an origin story on par in quality with Clifford the Big Red Dogs. Mothra is still the Moth, Queen of the Monsters. Rodan is still a pterodactyl vulture thing. And Ghidorah is still an alien. They even go out of their way to state that he's not part of the natural order and is a false king, just so you know why he and Godzilla have to fight in the first place. By the way, speaking of aliens, have you all seen that alternate cut of that movie, Mac and Me? I mean, dude, that kid gets shot in the fucking chest, what the Going on with the good, let's talk about the action. Another thing I talked about in the 2014 Zilla was how the Jaws approach really didn't always work, and specifically how I think it failed in the cutaway from the original Muto fight. This movie gets it right straight away by immediately giving us a proper taste of what's coming with Godzilla vs. Ghidorah in Antarctica. From that point on, there is a ton of monster showcases with tons of destruction, and it's super fun! I really do love that Rodan awakening scene. That of course brings us down to our final climax, which made me climax. The big four in a tornado tag team match. Ghidorah and Rodan versus Mothra and Godzilla. It almost makes me want to pull out another Kaiju Mania logo, but I think I'll leave that one in the cringe bucket right next to the Mario rimming Donkey Kong Doshinji I made a while back ago. It's a bit of a shame that Mothra doesn't have a ton of screen time, but I'm glad to see her get involved in the fight at all. They really went all out here, including that skyscraper tackle I talked about earlier, dropping Godzilla back into orbit, and then another Easter egg with burning Godzilla to finish off Ghidorah. Like I said, it's a lot of fun, and when people ask me whether or not they should watch this movie, this is the kind of stuff I always turn them to when I say yes. It's moments like these that make me absolutely love this movie, and remind me why I enjoy this franchise in the first place. Not to mention, I think it's some of the best monster stuff we've seen in the Godzilla franchise as a whole thus far, to be honest with you. There's a grace to their ferocity, and you're able to establish some sort of connection to them through that. And that's something that not a lot of other movies can say. So, yes, there's a lot about this movie that I like a lot, but also a lot about this movie that I really don't like. Considering my fanbase, I'm sure I came off as fairly nitpicky and harsh, but I don't know. The thing is, I don't think this is a bad movie. As a matter of fact, I think this is a good movie, but I just really wish it was a great movie. A lot of the foundation to make that so is already here, ready to be capitalized on, and it just wasn't. For every great moment filled with excitement and action, there's another holding our attention on characters we really don't care about. This is one of the things that I think the Funny Monkey movie got so right. They were able to make both sides of the coin a positive, as opposed to here where one of them is a clear negative. So what I want to get at here is that we shouldn't settle for okay when we know we can get better. The common argument I hear made is that it's not meant to be anything more than a fun action thriller that really doesn't take itself seriously. So why are you? And you know what? I get that. I love me my dumb fun movies. Hell, Psycho Goreman, a movie about a killer alien overlord being controlled by children, is my favorite movie of the year so far.
I do not care for hunky boys. Or do I?
But the difference is that PG knows exactly what it is, while I'm not convinced that Godzilla King of the Monsters does. It wants to be a Godzilla movie, but also a family drama, but also a climate change movie, but also aliens. You see what I'm getting at here? I wanted to love this movie. I really did. I waited years for this movie to release, and I remember never shutting up about it back when I was working at a movie theater. So it really does pain me to level with you all here and tell you that I was disappointed. There were just too many fatal missteps in between the moments that helped this movie shine. But where this movie did shine, it shined bright. So again, I know a lot of you enjoyed this movie a lot, and I'm really glad that you did. I'm not here to detract from your opinion or tell you that it's wrong. If you felt that it worked out, then you are absolutely justified in feeling that way. I just hope you all can see where it is that I'm coming from and maybe even discuss in the comments about it. But now I'm just pretty much rambling at this point. As it stands, I'd still say that Kong Skull Island is my favorite in the Monsterverse, followed by this movie and then Godzilla 2014. I'm very much hoping that Godzilla vs. Kong takes that top spot when it comes out in just a few days after this upload. It's got a lot of those building blocks, like a returning cast, that this movie was missing. So we're looking to be in a really great spot, and I can't wait to talk about it as soon as I possibly can. But until then, my throat is dying. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.
Lots and lots of praise.
Cause I am the baddest of them all. If you ain't about money, then I don't mess with y'all. Y'all think I don't get girls, cause I'm very tall. If she sees my stacks, I bet you that she calls. You know that I am the baddest of them all. If you ain't about money, then I don't mess with y'all. Y'all think I don't get girls, cause I'm very tall. If she sees my stacks, I bet you that she calls.
I'm gonna kiss Mothra on the mouth.